what's your plan to be consistent across all of those
I think
franchises?
that we've done a good job of learning what the vehicle format is on the go.
Have you talked to any athlete who has consistently used?
I truly want this to be the focal point, is that this should be in the player periodization. What we've structured the sports complex program as is you don't pay a cent. In fact, you're going to get a
Youth Sports Insider, where passion meets opportunity.
Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of the Youth Sports Insider. Today, we're with Justin Jarman. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bill. Looking forward to chatting. Thanks for
Awesome.
inviting me.
Yeah, and Justin, give us a quick, 30-second who you are. You can take more than 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Who you are, what you do, what you're building in the sports area. One, I'm just absolutely fascinated by the product in general. I just think it's, everybody I had talked to about what you're doing was like, oh my, especially athletes. It's like, oh, if I only had that when we were coming up, right?
Right.
So, yeah, Justin, dive in. What is it? What are you doing? Why are you qualified to do what you're doing?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Jack Stewart, my business partner and co-founder, started Cool Factor about a year and a half ago. And I think about 4 months into that, I've known Jack for years through my best friend and his wife. And I was kind of looking for my next move back into entrepreneurship. I've been a career-long entrepreneur all my life. I took about a, I'd say 4 or 5 year kind of hiatus, just founder's burnout. And my
No idea what you're talking about.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And my mutual friends that I know Jack through had told me that Jack had started Cool Factor, what he was up to. I said, wow, that's actually really interesting. I was living or I was out in North Carolina at the time, looking for an excuse back to get back to Los Angeles, to get back into entrepreneurship. Chatted with Jack, loved what he was doing. I said, look, I'll invest in the company. Fast forward about 4 months into that, I said, look, I love what you're doing. I think that I could come on board and really kind of help take it to the next level. So I joined full time as a co-founder and CEO of Cool Factor in about March of last year in 24. We were then kind of fast tracked into the Founders Boost Accelerator program. And it's worth noting Jack's a former MLS pro soccer player. So that was why he kind of found and saw the opportunity of delivering athletic recovery to the
Mm.
masses. And Cool Factor basically is mobile athletic recovery. So we've got 4 vehicles on the road now. They're all equipped with full body cryotherapy, Normatec compression systems, zero gravity lounge chairs, percussive massage guns, a couple of other of the Hyper Ice suite of product offerings. And we work primarily with competitive youth sports as well as adult amateur athletics, all your marathons, etc. So that's been kind of the quick ride on Cool Factor and how we got where we're at.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you had mentioned you've been an entrepreneur before. Uh, what lessons did you learn that you're in the past that you're bringing forward to, and there's always new challenges, of course, but that you're bringing forward to your to Cool Factor today?
Oh, so there's two main ones that stick out.
Yeah.
One is focus. I think
Mhm.
some of my early entrepreneurial career decisions, um, I was kind of trying to do too much. There were multiple ventures in the mix, and those certainly suffered from the lack of focus.
Yeah.
And I had it's been pretty wild of just kind of serendipitous opportunities to work with some former business partners where they have had just this insane focus. And I had to, it wasn't until my second or third startup where I just said, okay, I have to put horse blinders on here and solely focus on, one business, and really kind of hone in on what I'm good at. And there was a direct correlation to success of, those ventures versus the very first venture, which was still successful, but
Mhm.
it was a much longer path. It was, twice
Yeah.
as long and half as rewarding, basically. Um, and the second one is momentum. I think that any startup, when you're just getting the ball rolling, you need to find those momentum wins that both drive you and keep your energy and
Mm.
focus and enthusiasm, kind of, in the line of sight. And when you lose that momentum, there's a correlation or causation, I should say, of, your entire kind of psyche and self-esteem, confidence, and the ability to kind of effectively run the business and kind of focus on all the mundane tasks. So I think that
Mm.
creating
Hmm.
a plan of momentum, which is easier than I think what many might perceive it to be. It doesn't need to be these big wins, but it's really kind of putting your foot forward, and finding what you can achieve, what you have direct control over, and associating that with momentum wins.
And that's a really good point as you're, I mean, I think that's with a lot of roles, but definitely in a startup environment, those little wins and to keep the sail, the sail full and, moving forward, right? The maybe give an example of how you because startup life, right, is it's a roller coaster. You have your good days and your bad days, especially, you missed that sale that was going to be a big deal early on, where maybe, 2 years from now, it's like, okay, well, we're on to the next. But in the beginning, those things are big. So how do you stay motivated to the next deal when each deal, for example, right, is a big deal? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I've had the benefit of having more of a deal role within the companies I've started. And when I took that
Yeah.
4 or 5 year hiatus, I was in growth and sales related and strategy related roles. So,
Yeah.
uh, my ability to deal or mute, rejection is a superpower.
Yeah.
And
I love
I
that.
think
Mute.
that,
Yep.
yeah, and I really think that if you are a solo founder or the co-founder tasked with being your number one salesman or salesperson, um, that you have to just kind of set your ego aside. Don't let your feelings get hurt. It's just business,
Yeah.
and roll up your sleeves and pound pavement, basically, whether
Yeah.
that's picking up phones or showing up and trying to get that next deal done. I mean, last week I lost a big deal, and it was just like shifting that mentality and that inner monologue was your default is to just go to, oh man, and wallow in that loss, but really shifting that mindset and kind of looking at it as like a full benefit opportunity. It's like, okay, this is a full benefit opportunity. On to the next. Learn, take away what how, why you may have lost the deal, and some things are just out of your control. And just find that momentum and that next win, and take
Yeah.
control over it.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been having a very similar conversation, but in a much different context with my daughter who's applying for colleges right now. And
Oh,
the wait list and then the denials, and I'm, just like, telling my wife too, it's, she gets really low. And I'm like, first off, okay, give her some time. Give her a few hours, let her feel sorry for herself, and then we'll go in and have the conversation, right? Because, teenagers, right? They can get pretty emotional where you can't talk to them about yeah
yep,
right, and she's not there yet of just moving on. For her, that's end of life, right? Like,
yeah.
yeah. So no, that's good advice, not only in business, but in dealing with the life issues. Talk about let's start from the beginning though. So okay, so you're developing Cool Factor. you have this great idea in concept, it's beautiful, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to sit in your right in your trailer after my son played baseball? So I can imagine, I mean, that would have been a lifesaver. He was a catcher, right, in between games, right? That would have been beautiful for him. But that, one thing, writing it down on paper and you guys concepting the idea of cool factor, then it's like, okay, do we have enough? Is a youth market going someplace? Is this, how did you assess the youth sports market? And again, in our case, it's not too hard, but I'm curious how you just dove into it. How did you find the perfect customer? And you're probably still looking for the perfect customer in the perfect situation, but walk us through that process.
Yeah. So, I have to kind of borrow from a little bit of Jack's initial, since he, was the first one
Yeah.
out of the gates with the company. And it was really, he had the network because of his, relation to soccer, and post retirement, he stayed within the soccer world as a coach just for the love of the game, in addition to working a full-time job, and then saw the opportunity in working with the ECNL and some of the teams that he was coaching. Really just saw the opportunity to bring that elite recovery offering
Mm.
to these
Mhm.
competitive athletes, and specifically within soccer, there's very much the player pathway that exists. So the level of competitive play is getting younger and younger, similar to what you see in the European, soccer systems, sorry, football systems, and so um, he had that kind of direct tie and an opportunity, and he took the leap of faith to get the first vehicle in action, and then from there, I kind of entered the picture, and I had just by pure curiosity, started paying attention to the competitive youth category, which was really starting to kind of like, you know, big signals of it picking up
Yeah.
steam. And then this year has been just a absolute freight train in terms of adoption and interest from private equity and, the whole
Right.
nine yards.
Yeah.
And so really it was like, okay, let's go and run these vehicles in the different competitive youth sports categories, primarily on sports, or sorry, tournament weekends. And then that dovetailed into practice recovery for club teams in different sports. What sports do work, which sports do not work. Why are some of the competitive youth category sports not working? Lack of education, lack of just, interest. Uh, so it was really just fact finding and turning over rocks to
Mm.
understand and learn the things that we just didn't know. Um, and I think that there was very, kind of quick iterations in us understanding and learning what did and did not work. And that also shows the path of how we went from one to four vehicles, in about a 12-month period. And now going from, four vehicles, one of which is a franchisee, which I know we'll jump into,
Yeah.
to now we're rolling out 10 additional units across sports complexes. So it was, we really kind of iterated and learned what did and did not work. And with the format of the mobile vehicle, just allowed us to kind of make those small adjustments so that we were fitting into where we saw the signals of our ideal customer profiles and opportunities.
Well, what's amazing too about what you're doing is, a lot of tech is being built, software apps and AI and all of that, but you're building a physical product and trailers and outfitting these trailers with, this gear is not cheap, right? So the startup cost of just one trailer is pretty high, right? And did that um, factor into the franchise model when you were looking at how to scale the business and the expense side of things and versus just owner, right? You own it and you're just building and finding operators for it.
Yeah, I think it certainly did play a role,
Hmm.
where I looked at the market opportunity, which it is it's a pick and shovel service base that is
Yeah.
kind of providing a service offering to the sports community and adult amateur athletics in addition to competitive youth. And so in my kind of prior roles with more hardware based growth businesses, and it wasn't one that I'd owned, but a company I was working for called Everytable. It was very much like, how do we scale this and own this market and just be everywhere? And that's really where I saw the opportunity for Cool Factor on the franchise system. And I had also invested in a franchise corporate wise business, and so had some understanding of what the franchise system and process looked like.
Yeah.
And saw the opportunity that I could get more coverage in a quicker basis by launching the franchise system and reducing that operational risk and complexity of just managing and logistics and coordination and outreach and sales, and really hone in on what my forte is, which is more on the experiential brand marketing side, which we can jump into, experiential marketing via athletic recovery, and go out and really kind of lock in those sponsorship or experiential brand marketing partnerships to help subsidize these franchisees' operations in Arizona, Dallas, Florida, Georgia, all of these big sports related states that we know we want to grow into. And then, at the end of the day, reducing that operational risk. That was one of the big reasons why, and coverage, we could get there quicker through the franchise model.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, we had Soccer Shots on, the CEO of Soccer Shots, and talk about a franchise model that just absolutely scaled and worked. It was really impressive. Been around quite a number of years to figure out the model, and making sure that every Soccer Shot organization is sharing the same information and the whole curriculum that goes into it. And it's pretty fascinating. And so okay, so you have this trailer, it pulls up to a youth sporting event. Does it kind of work like a food truck in that sense, where sometimes you have to pay to be at the event, and sometimes you can just roll up and the tournaments just kind of accept it because it's a nice add-on to what they're doing? What's the experience been so far?
Yeah, so the first format is a trailer. The second format, which
Yeah,
the
that's right.
other
Yeah.
three vehicles are actually full chassis vehicles, right? So everything's built into
Oh, okay.
to one
Yeah,
chassis, like
one
a
chassis. Yep.
converted Sprinter
Yep.
van. We
Oh,
have
okay.
our
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
marquee vehicle. That's actually a 26-foot box truck with two brand new state-of-the-art electric cryo machines in there, and they showcase really nicely where there's a stage that drops out and really
Nice.
kind of creates this unique experience. Um, but the model is comprised of three different ways that we make money, basically. The first is we work with the tournament organizers or leagues, and they see the benefit of providing these recovery therapies to the players. And so they'll pay us to attend and then offer the recovery services basically free of charge, or maybe it'll be free compression and player parent pays for cryotherapy, or they'll pay for everything. Very reasonable rates. They'll even bake it into some of their tournament entry fees, so that it's a little bit more streamlined and open. Or there's a scenario where we call it conversion of service, where we understand thresholds of attendance at these tournaments or marathons or so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So we'll just show up expecting to convert a certain percentage, and we know we'll be in the money and profitable. And our prices are way more reasonable than what you'd find in competitive or traditional brick and mortar recovery centers. So it makes for a nice kind of opportunity as value proposition. And the last, and what we've really kind of caught a lot of steam in lately, is running experiential marketing via athletic recovery in conjunction with big brand partners. It could be smaller brand partners, but we've had success.
Yeah.
So we worked with Adidas and continue to work with Adidas, whereby they basically will take over and kind of serve an experience of athletic recovery. And it's kind of the vehicles might be wrapped with their brand signage and communications and tents and flags. Really creates this awesome, athletic recovery lounge experience. Um, and when you look at the experiential marketing model, when you apply across our fleet of vehicles in the different markets, paired with where we're moving into new markets with the sports complex growth strategy, you then see these kind of aggregate numbers that are very attractive to these brands that want to be in front of the competitive youth category. You've got player parent, um, the right average household incomes that they're looking for, typically ideal customer profiles in terms of what the brand is in association to these competitive youth sports. And then same thing goes for the adult amateur athletics as well. So now you're looking at an entire fleet that goes from 4 vehicles to 14 units, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
across about 5 million impressions within a athletic or sports related environment. So that's been a big kind of unlock for us that then allows us on the corporate side to focus on how our role and responsibility as a franchisor can assist our franchisee locations and help subsidize, generate revenue through these more national brand partnerships, and then passing down revenue to them that way.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And we had talked about this, which is, if Adidas comes in and they're sponsoring, one of your vehicles, this isn't they're just walking through, they're sitting there. Anybody who's taking a treatment, right, sits there for what, average 20 minutes, was it?
Yeah,
15
you're
minutes?
you're in the athletic circuit for about 20 minutes,
Yeah.
and 15 minutes of that is in a zero gravity chair in the compression boots. So when you compare that to your traditional experiential marketing, interaction, you're at a 20x
Yeah,
with the cool
exactly. Yeah.
factor
Yeah.
experience in terms of brand exposure, education. You're sitting there communicating. They're downloading an app to maybe utilize the recovery circuit, or they are, engaging with a Microsoft Surface Pro. So it really creates this, and there's a good value exchange. Your traditional experiential marketing, hey, take away this frisbee, right? And it's
Yeah.
branded with whatever,
Right, right,
and give
right.
us your
Yeah.
email address.
Yeah.
There's a good value exchange where, they're getting to access a, recovery benefit. They're in the athletic, competitive sport on the field. Um, and they can utilize all these recovery services free of charge in exchange that, download the app and it's relevant to the sport that you're playing. And so it really fits nicely in terms of what is offered.
Yeah, that makes sense. The looking at the um, business model a little bit deeper, um, the sports complexes that you're working with, we've talked to a couple sports complexes, and they have gyms, and they rent out the gyms in the evening and in the weekends, right? And that's where their money comes in, and that kind of 9 to 5, 9 to 3 hours, there's not a lot of foot traffic coming through there. So adding additional services, one was talking about adding a barber shop, right? Renting out a small space for a barber shop. Here's another
Mm-hmm.
opportunity for sports complexes, if I'm hearing you correctly, to add cool factor as a new revenue stream for in this case, I guess it's rent, they would be, right? Or you tell me, but it is another added service that they can add to their sports complex.
Absolutely. I think that one of the big things that we were trying to overcome, because we regularly work with sports complexes with the existing fleet of vehicles, and they loved it. we were caught in this kind of conundrum where they wouldn't pay for the service. Sometimes they would want us to pay to attend.
Mhm.
And the economics were just, it was difficult to unlock. Um, and so we saw the opportunity as it being an overlay of opportunity for growth. And then we went out and, pounded pavement to identify a financing partner that would unlock those growth opportunities that solved for the sports complex's needs,
Okay.
which was
Uh-huh.
generating revenue,
Yeah.
and solved for our needs and making the unit economics work, which we didn't have the capex to go, um, build these out on our own. So that unlocked with the financing partner. Now, what we've structured the sports complex program as is you don't pay a cent. In fact, you're going to get a rev share and generate between $20,000 to $40,000 annually as part of this rev share. We're going to drop these semi-permanent units that we've converted into an athletic recovery lounge, fully decked out with everything that you see on board the vehicles. Run the same model on the experiential marketing side, right? So some of these might be wrapped with a brand partner, powered by Cool Factor, everything like that. And then there's that additional value prop to the sports
Mm.
complex, but now they have a new amenity to attract new sports organizers and tournaments on a sports tourism basis to come through, and why they should use and select their sports complex versus the one down the road. And then you also have home teams. So our first sports complex up in Davis, California, has 24 kind of home teams that practice throughout the week. So
Mm.
now we have this regular weekly recurring subscription component that you would find at a traditional brick and mortar recovery business, but it's right there on the field. It's at a substantially reduced price versus your brick and mortar, because we don't have the same economics to deal with that a brick and mortar has to deal with. Um, and so, then that you kind of expand out. Now you
Yeah.
also have the opportunity to attract local, local citizens that live in, nearby city, that they now have an option to go to a much cheaper recovery lounge at the sports complex versus the brick and mortars. So it's really kind of shaping up to be a big growth opportunity for us with regards to sports complex strategy and how we've
Yeah.
modeled the economics around it.
And it's interesting too, because if you think, I guess, sports complexes, they could be soccer fields, polo fields, right? Lacrosse, but they could also be indoor facilities themselves, right? Gyms and, volleyball courts and stuff like that, right? So the model that you're talking about is putting these in the example, because you and I, the little backstory, we talked about the Davis location, right? So you're dropping this converted um, uh,
Shipping container.
shipping container, right, in
Yep.
on this outdoor facility, which totally makes sense. And then what I wasn't clear on is the people who are using it, you're charging them a subscription, monthly subscription. So, maybe one tier, different tiers come in once a week, whatever type of thing, right? And pay a flat fee per month. Is that correct?
Exactly. So your home teams are likely going to be under the subscription model. We've worked
Hmm.
some really great kind of economic deals so that the teams that are there on a weekly basis are getting these just sick price deals.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, we want to provide these recovery therapies and make it truly accessible for the masses.
Right.
And the parents are already paying quite a bit of money
Right.
for these club related teams, paired with where else they may be traveling on a tournament weekend basis
Yeah.
outside of their home base. So yeah, we very much have kind of priced it so that nearby local teams that are always there have the benefits of access to therapies right there on the spot. But then that carries over to your weekend tournaments. So you've got these players, and I'm happy to dive into a little bit more. But this is where I get a little like antsy and heated, because these players are playing at a much competitive level at a younger age,
Yeah.
much more competitive level, younger age, year round, possibly multi sport. They're practicing probably 4 days a week and then playing on tournament weekends up to 3 games a day. The just the longevity of their career is at risk if they don't take the proper precautions. I think we were talking about on our kind of backstories, like my recovery back in the day was walk it off.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. Rub some dirt on it and walk it off,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
So, yeah, that's where I get a pretty heated and passionate about, like, I truly want this to be the focal point, is that this should be in the player periodization mindset of these, young competitive athletes, that you need to prehab, post-hab before you get injured. And it's for the prolongment of your career at the end of the day.
Well, when you talk to athletes, because the cryo technology and the boots and everything else was only available when it first came out at the pro level. Then it came down to the college level, and now it's coming down to the grassroots level. And if you talk to any athlete who has consistently used cryotherapy, it's unbelievable, and the healing process that happens. And you really hit on this concept that I think we're seeing as a youth sports industry is youth sports players on average are, like you said, are playing more, doing more than some of your NCAA athletes, right? There's more because if you think about it, NCAA, they're specialized now. Not to say that they don't practice year round, but
Yeah.
they don't quote unquote play year round. Um, but the expectation is for a youth athlete, they're still finding the love of the sports. And I say sports because I bet, I mean, I know that even with my club basketball team, a lot of the girls are doing multiple sports and sometimes
Yep.
triple, right? Where,
Yep.
they're sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't. But, you know, the, and I'm not a sports therapist or, physical therapist by any stretch of the means, but I gotta imagine there's got to be some downtime to recover and recoup and just mentally and physically, right? I mean, I think that's pretty natural. And then now you're coming along and I can see where your passion is in this particular category. It's not just, oh, we had a great idea and let's fit into the youth sports and see if we can make money off of it. What you're doing truly is a need for these youth athletes who are competing hard on a regular basis. And if you think about what drives you, is that one of your drivers truly? And I mean, do you think that as a business person, generally speaking, again, here is you got to have that like passion that just keeps you going other than the dollars and cents?
Yeah, I think that has been one of the big drivers and frustrations. I see. I was, a young athlete that played multi-sport, and a few years into college through some club volleyball, and some really good buddies that it went to the NFL and NBA, and a lot that played in college. And it was just like, I've had two ACL knee surgeries,
Mm,
and that's affected my ability to kind of pursue some of the more rigorous type sports that I wish I could still play today. I mean, I still stay very active, and I do an ice bath, sauna, gym 4 maybe 5 times a week,
oh wow.
and then on the weekends I'm out in the vehicles, ripping the cryotherapy. And I see, and it's one of those things. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid. It's like, if you've never done cryotherapy or if you've never done an ice bath, go do it, and then tell me that you don't feel something as a positive, whether it's a physical or
Mm,
mental
yeah.
outcome. And there's, I think just a lot of that regimen and discipline serves a young mind in such a positive way. And I've seen that carry over, that discipline and mental fortitude and grit that I learned from sports carried over into my perseverance and why I have the mental mindset. And a lot of my friends that have the same type of
Yeah.
mental fortitude, perseverance, grit, um, have come because of the discipline from sports. And I see that as like, we're interacting with all these young competitive players, on the side, and it's pretty funny because I don't have kids yet. And it's pretty funny to just kind of like reflect back, like, oh man, I remember that's exactly how I was shooting the shit with my buddies,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and just kind of seeing them go through, and you see the kind of spark of interest where I'll never forget, I was down in San Diego at one of the tournaments, and there was one kid that was one of the most inquisitive, intelligent, like, asking me about the startup costs and the business model, and he couldn't have been older than 13 years old. And I just was like, dude, how do you know to ask these questions? And he's like,
Yeah.
I'm just, a curious, kind of curious, he's very intelligent. And I just was like, okay, like seeing that and kind of putting the pieces together, of what I now have control over to offer, what I, have benefited from, just kind of plays into the love of the business, and kind of why Jack and I are doing what we're doing.
Yeah, no, and if you think about the ecosystem of youth sports, we had Orgo on the other day as well, and she services the parent, right? There's a lot of tech and things coming out to service the coach, and now you're really servicing the specific player, right? And again, it's going to take a lot of people like you and other entrepreneurs to um, service this industry. One, because it's so large, right? Every zip code in the United States has some sports going on, right? Youth sports,
Mm-hmm.
right? No, big or smaller. Um, but it's actually quite fascinating when you take a look at it. If you look at the attendance, it's bigger than um, NFL or bigger than pro sports and college sports combined as far as attendance year round. It's absolutely
Mm.
stunning, right?
Yep.
So um, the that's why you're seeing also the equity come in and
Yeah.
and roll ups and things like that. People are starting to take a look at the model. However, the ugly side of that can get to where it becomes a business,
Yes.
right? And we're dealing with, let's just make it real simple, kids 18 and below for the most part in the youth market,
Yep.
right? They're still in high school or grade school or middle school, right? And we have to remember they're kids. So how do we um, as a advocate for our children make sure that that is the forefront, right? We play sports, right? Play is a key word in that.
Yep.
These are not professional athletes at all, right? Their brains are still growing, their bodies are still growing, and we need to be the adults in the room to recognize that. So how do we come together as, and maybe you don't have an answer to this, but how do we come together as a industry to say, okay, we need to keep this in mind?
Yeah, I think I've thought about this for probably the past month. There's been quite a bit of articles that have come out, and I've probably had a couple hundred conversations between tournament organizers or companies within the sports space that are focused on competitive youth, and I think right now, over the past 2 years or so, it has moved into this profits over players, and we need to get to the point where it's players over profit. And I think I
Hmm.
just saw like ESPN and maybe Steph Curry's foundation just launched the 60 by 30, and it was
Yeah, that's right.
very
Yeah,
much towards youth sports and embracing and putting the focal point on not ruining this
yeah,
for the kids or the players, and I see it a lot, and it's just frustrating. And I know people that might watch this say, "Well, of course you want it to be this way versus the other way, and I just don't. At the end of the day, where there's enough ways for us to still be profitable, but not think of the player last. And I'm not going to name names, but I've dealt with a few organizations where it's very much profits first,
Yeah.
and what are you going to give me, and not with the player in mind. And that's just not for my business model, but in a lot of the other kind of player benefit opportunities. So, I think that there's just going to have to be some. I think that brands are going to step up to the plate and really help ease some of those profit kind of scenarios.
Yeah.
But then the organizers, the tournament organizers, need to look at it through the lens of you know that this is not just a figure or a number. This is a young human being,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what is the holistic way to approach the best interest of that young human being first. And I think that's just the condition of capitalism, and I get it, and I'm a fan of capitalism, but I think that there are some right ways to kind of approach it, that solve for the player first mentality. And I think that there's just going to have to be some more vocal um, figureheads or thought leaders that come out to really put pressure. And I think that the brands will step up, and then the organizers will kind of back down and understand that the market demand is that it has to be player first.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And I think you're right. I mean, I think some of the issues around, we have to keep in mind there's the, and this is interesting too, if you think about it, step back, there's the competitive youth sports, and then you have your rec sports, right? And then I would even say that, some of the, a lot of the programs are struggling just, you know, to make it, right? And there's a lot of nonprofits in the space trying to supplement, right, the cost of sports. But this is, cost of youth sports is getting higher and higher. One, just to participate, two, you think about trainers and you think about all the ancillary services, the travel and all of that. So it is a big ecosystem with lots of tentacles, and I don't know where I was going with that, but it is just, there's a huge range of youth sports. I guess really what I was trying to say, right? From your nonprofits to your struggling teams and maybe in some of the inner cities to the rec teams and leagues to your more competitive sports programs and clubs and tournaments. So, you know, uh, it's a it's it's a just an ecosystem with lots of nuances and lots of areas for improvement and positive impact, right? Anyway, just was thinking as you were talking and saying all of that, did you, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I think that I'd read somewhere recently that it's competitive youth sports is still the Wild West,
Yeah,
and and I think that there should be a line drawn in some circumstances. I've heard kind of whispers of NIL kind of creeping into
yeah,
that category. I think some states, I'm based here in California, I think you can do NIL deals in high school level. And it's just like, okay, like, you know, um, I'm all for, local teams or leagues supporting, the jerseys for the little leagues and having the logo of the Padres on stuff like that. Like, absolutely.
yeah.
Um, but some of the whispers of NIL at younger and younger age, I'm just like, come on,
Right, it's
guys.
got to
Like,
stop. I agree. Yeah, yeah. No, it's got to
so
be a line drawn. Well, let's jump back into cool factor and as you're what was the aha moment for you guys? Like, what was the, okay, we have something here.
um, I think that. the big aha moment was the attention that we caught from some of these top tier tournament organizers
Hmm.
that are really looking at how they enhance the tournament amenity offering and experience.
Okay. Yeah, makes
Um,
sense.
that was a big unlock because it was like, okay, we're not going to face the scenario where they're like, hey, yes, we love this service. We'd love for you to attend. It's going to be 2 grand, or
Yeah.
going like, you want us to pay you 2 grand and then you want us to charge um, and very well understanding all the economics at play of how much they rented the field, how much they're collecting on ticket sales. I mean, these things are profit powerhouses a lot of times.
A lot of times.
Um,
Yeah.
and then you come across the tournament organizers that they get it and they understand. I mean, you'd be surprised at how many kids are coming through and the parents are just like, they're exhausted, they're dehydrated, they've been on a plane, they're sleep deprived, which is a 58% increase in injury risk in tournament play if you have sleep deprivation. And so
Yeah.
um, the tournament organizers, there are some really great ones, and that was the unlock where it was like, hey, look, like we don't have a ton of money. Can we work a deal to get you out there? Yes, 100%. Let us go find a brand that will subsidize this further so that they make a little money.
Mm.
We make our necessary money, which is very reasonable. I'm kind of an open book on that. And that was kind of like, then we went back to them and said, hey, look, this is going to bring us more credibility and help us go close more of these brand deals to bring these amenities to all of your tournaments, et cetera, et cetera. Will you give us the exclusive carve out on the sports sponsorship for athletic recovery for your tournament ecosystem?
Mm.
And they're like, yes, absolutely. And I'm like, do you want money in exchange for this on a rev share basis? Or do you want to add this as an amenity to attract it? We want it as an amenity to attract because it'll also help on the ground during tournament play. It'll increase competitive. So it was like, finally, like, okay, like this is clicking. And then, of course, the experiential marketing side. Um, and this goes outside of just competitive youth, the adult amateur athletics category. These brands
Right. Yeah.
you want to be in front of these athletes, and like I said, it's an awesome value exchange in terms of what the athlete is receiving in exchange for an engagement with that brand. So I'm very bullish on the business model with regards to the experiential marketing side as well, and really how it grows. And then lastly, the sports complex that was so there's been these like kind
Yeah.
of like exponential leaps on the iteration of how we've approached the business model, and those being three big kind of unlocks along this um, year and change journey.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's really it was because I was just going to ask that to be very explicit about this hasn't been a long journey yet, right? You're just at the early stages, and I love the way you said that because there are those unlocks, and that's what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast about these little momentum, right? Just keep you going and
Yeah.
figuring things out, and that's for an entrepreneur, that's the exciting piece, right? Just getting as many of these unlocks that make sense that keep us moving forward. Um, just a couple more or one more question on the kind of the franchise model. I know this is new for you. I know a lot of like I said, soccer shots and these programs similar to that are offering athletic training for kids or looking at franchise models. Um, how do you what's your plan to be consistent across all of those franchises, as you know, right? Just like any franchise model, if I go, if I'm at one of your facilities in LA, it should be very similar to the one in, Maryland, right? So,
Yep. Yeah, so I think that we've done a good job of learning what the vehicle format is on the go-to-market basis. We started off with the 24-foot trailer. That was our MVP, if you will.
hmm
The second was the converted Sprinter vehicle,
hmm
which our first franchisees out of Dallas, Texas, have. And then the latest model is electric-based cryotherapy. It's a 26-foot box truck. That's our marquee.
Hmm.
So the go-to-market scale version is an electric cryotherapy unit in the converted Sprinter van format, um, which our Dallas group has a nitrogen-powered cryotherapy, which is great because the
Hmm.
cost of nitrogen is 50% cheaper than it is in California, i.e., why it did not make sense for us in California.
Yeah.
Um, and then you pair that go-to-market version of the vehicle with all the modalities, everything. You're looking about 180,000 to 250,000 in total investment, and that's not a marketing franchise. Typically, you market first 3 months of investment. That's all in. You need approximately 80,000 in liquid capital because you could finance the vehicle itself. We have a financing partner for the cryo chambers. And basically let the debt load of the business be carried through the cash flow generated of the business, and really only need about $80,000 of liquid capital to get the business off the ground. Um, so those are some of the moving parts and how we landed on the vehicle format, the go-to-market scale version, and then all the systems and everything built into it. Nothing groundbreaking. We've got a custom booking software that fits into our
Hmm.
business model. There's not a lot of off-the-shelf solutions that are cost effective for the mobile event based, but also kind of weekly route runs. So that's launching here in about 2 weeks with a brand new
Oh, fascinating.
website
Oh,
and the
wow.
coolfactor.com domain that we're switching to. So I think that, and lastly, it being the corporate responsibility on how we help and assist the franchisees in generating revenues on that experiential marketing brand sponsorship
Yeah.
umbrella. So you kind of trickle all of that down. There is a standardization across the system that we've landed on, and that is working well.
That's awesome. I mean, and that, yeah, that's what I loved about what you guys were doing too. I mean, I love the franchise model that you're bringing forward. I love the fact that you have this, sponsorship model kind of built in, and you're thinking about that because it's perfect for it, right? Doing truck wraps, internal, as well. When you're sitting
Yep,
there, you have that 20 minutes, right, of attention. That's really hard to come by these days,
yep,
right? So,
yep.
and then and again, you're filling a need in the youth sports market. These athletes are competing at a high level at a regular basis. And as you said before, if you've never done it before, just go and experience, and you're going to get a
Absolutely.
high afterwards,
Yep,
right?
yep.
That is second to
Absolutely.
none. So, and the athletes will feel a huge difference. And, again, we spend money on, all things athletic for our kids, but something I think that does get ignored is the therapy part of it and the recovery part of it, right?
Yep,
So,
absolutely.
well, Justin, how does someone find you? Where should they go to maybe get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can find us on socials, Cool Factor Cryo or at Cool Factor Cryo. As I mentioned, coolfactor.com. We're launching. If you go there, it's going to redirect to coolfactorcryo.com. But 2 weeks will be kind of
Just Cool
housed on
Factor.
coolfactor.com. Yeah.
Awesome.
And Justin at coolfactorcryo.com is my email. Feel free to reach out with any questions or comments. And happy to connect with anyone that's interested in chatting more.
Justin, thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing your journey, and we look forward to seeing where you are a year from today. So, thank
Awesome,
you.
Bill. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And that wraps another Youth Sports Insider. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned. We have some amazing interviews coming up. If this is your first time, go check us out. We're on all of the podcast and YouTube, and or just go to Youth Sports Insider. Grab the show notes there for today's podcast and all the previous. That's at youthsportsinsider.com. All right, coaches and operators. Till next time.